History is full of secrets, mysteries, and incredible events that are hard to believe in for a person of the 21st century. And there are those that are especially difficult to believe because of the scale and savagery of such events. It is about such historical facts that we are talking about in today's video Top F. Before the video starts, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notification to catch all new releases. Grab your popcorn, we start. Extermination of cats in the Middle Ages. In different eras and different countries, the attitude towards cats varied. Everyone knows that cats were very fond of the inhabitants of ancient Egypt. The cat was also considered a sacred animal by the Vikings, as the Scandinavians believed that it was associated with the Freya, goddess of love and fertility. In the Edda Minor, a collection of ancient Scandinavian poems, Freya traveled on a team pulled by two cats. But in medieval Europe, cats, especially black ones, were considered companions of witches. These views became especially relevant in connection with the struggle of the Catholic Church against the remnants of paganism, including the Scandinavian cults that still existed in Europe. In particular, this struggle fell on the shoulders of the church courts, the forerunners of the Inquisition. Their appearance, as well as severe punishments for religious crimes, up to burning, go very deep into history. This was connected not only with the desire to deal with the echoes of paganism, but also with the crisis of the church caused by the emergence of numerous heresies, alternative religious teachings. Cathars, Waldensians, and Albigensians openly opposed the popes and considered the Catholic Church sinful and unnecessary. In this situation, by the 12th century, the opinion was strengthened that black cats are associated with Satan and demons. Perhaps the negative attitude towards cats was also associated with the misogyny of the Catholic Church. According to church hierarchies, women were responsible for original sin. They were associated with prudent and fickle cats, while men were associated with loyal dogs. This era of great superstition culminated in the 12th and 13th centuries. The heretics turned into accomplices of the devil, and they were accused of all mortal sins. Confessions from people detained for witchcraft were beaten out by torture. In particular, at that time, the Bishop of Hildesheim, Conrad, allegedly uncovered a satanic cult associated with a black cat. He claimed that his members worship the devil at night and arrange orgies, and also contact the other world with the help of a cat statue that comes to life, kissing it under the tail. These testimonies, of course, were obtained with the use of torture and intimidation. Pope Gregory IX responded to Conrad's signal. In 1234, the same year the Papal Inquisition was created, he signed the bull Vox in Rama, voice in Rama. The name refers to the biblical city of Rama from the stories about the destruction of Jerusalem and the weeping of Rachel. Bulla authorized the crusade against the freedom-loving inhabitants of Stettingen, a region in the northeast of modern Germany, who allegedly indulged in the Luciferian heresy, forgot, and despised the Catholic faith. The Pope urged to resolutely fight against Satanism and help the Church in every possible way in this matter. Some historians consider Bulla to be the first official document of the Catholic Church in which black cats are mentioned in connection with the witch and demonic rituals. How the Inquisition and witch hunters exterminated cats. Gradually, hatred of cats spread throughout Central and Western Europe, and the papacy continued to look for witches and their associates. So, Innocent VIII, who took the papacy 2.5 centuries after Gregory, wrote that the cat is the favorite animal of the devil and an idol for all witches. In the demonology treatise Malleus Maleficarum, the infamous Hammer of the Witches, first published in 1487, cats are called vessels for impure spirits that tempt people. A cat and a broom were considered the main attributes of sorcerers and witches. The most ardent hunters of evil spirits considered their presence in the house to be sufficient grounds for accusing the owner or mistress of witchcraft. Cats were burned along with such owners, and often in the same bag. However, the animals were killed not only together with the owner's sorcerers, but just like that. The Great Cat Extermination, as the historian Robert Darnton called it, lasted from the 13th to the 17th century. Animals were destroyed in various cruel ways. For example, they were scalded with boiling water or thrown from bell towers. Later, it even became part of some folk holidays. So, the Cat Festival, Kattenstoet, which takes place annually in the Belgian Ypres, is associated with a similar tradition. Today, of course, no one kills or tortures animals at the festival. Plush cats are thrown from the bell tower, and people standing below are trying to catch them. In the 16th century in France, cats were regularly burned just for the amusement of the crowd. The ashes left after the burning was taken home, believing that it brings good luck. This practice was only stopped in 1765. Especially rapidly, these phenomena spread in cities. In rural areas, where cats saved crops from rodents, the animals were not touched. Also, the mass extermination of cats did not follow in those countries where there was no widespread witch hunt, for example, in England. But this does not negate the fact that animals were exterminated in France, Germany, Poland, Spain, Belgium, and Holland. Evidence of irrational hatred of cats can be traced back to the 19th century. For example, the last case of throwing cats from the bell tower in Ypres dates back to 1817. What did it lead to? It is not known for certain how many cats were destroyed in the Middle Ages and how many of them were black. Nevertheless, some researchers believe that the scale of this extermination was very large and the consequences were catastrophic. In particular, the massacre of cats is called one of the causes of European plague epidemics, which swept through the region several times until the 17th century. So, in 1346, a terrible epidemic began, nicknamed the Black Death. The plague raged until 1351 and claimed the lives of 15 to 35 million people, more than 30% of the population of Europe. In unsanitary conditions, cats destroyed rodents that spread the infection. The black rats brought to Europe and the fleas that lived on them posed a particularly great danger. However, there is no direct evidence that the destruction of cats contributed greatly to the spread of the disease. For example, its carriers can be not only fleas, mainly living on the body of animals, but also human lice. At the same time, as shown by computer simulations, the transmission of infection through parasites from person to person is more likely than from rats to people. In addition, the plague is also transmitted by airborne droplets. In any case, the cruelty with which cats were treated in the Middle Ages is completely unacceptable. Fortunately, in our time, animal abuse is much less common and strongly condemned. And many of us cannot even imagine our life without cats. Children's Crusade. The so-called Children's Crusade of 1212 was not much in the truest sense of the word. Rather, it was a spontaneous popular movement, which received its name because a large number of children and adolescents took part in it. Formed in Germany and France, the enthusiasts decided to go to the east, to Jerusalem, to free the Holy Sepulchre, one of the main shrines of the Christian world. However, their undertaking did not end at all as they expected, and it was difficult to call this crowd an army. However, real knights, representatives of the Franciscan order, also joined her, but they, according to historical documents, were not armed. Pilgrims believed that the holiness of children would protect them better than any weapon. Purpose and causes of the Children's Crusade. Shortly before the Crusade of the Children of 1212, the Fourth Crusade, 1202 to 1204, took place, during which European knights intended to recapture Jerusalem, which had again come under Muslim control. But instead, they, having cooperated with the Venetians, sacked Constantinople, and on the ruins of the Byzantine Empire formed a new empire, the Latin. Thus, the goal was not achieved, and soon a popular movement broke out in France and Germany for the liberation of Jerusalem. The desire to go to the Holy Land was expressed by many, so their religious zeal was the reason for the Children's Crusade, which ended so ingloriously. Members of the Children's Crusade. Their exact number is unknown, but according to available data, the army consisted of about 30,000 children and adolescents, accompanied by representatives of the clergy. They were also joined by the Knights of the Franciscan Order, who were the only participants in the Children's Crusade, representing some kind of force. The rest of the improvised troops consisted simply of a crowd of enthusiastic people and unarmed at that. Then there was an opinion that the holiness and purity of children would not allow anyone to harm them, and, according to some information, even the Franciscan Knights went on a campaign without weapons. The course of events of the Children's Crusade. Since the participants in the Children's Crusade were mainly French and Germans, their crowd went to France through the Italian territories, convinced that the sea would part before them as it parted before Moses, according to the Bible. In Italy, they faced hostility, since 10 years ago, Crusader knights had already passed through these lands, plundering everything in their path. During the events of the Children's Crusade, many died during the crossing of the Alps. In addition, various criminals joined their army to profit from donations under the guise of pious pilgrims. A significant role in the events of the Children's Crusade was played by the French shepherd Stephen, who had a vision of Jesus, who ordered him to lead the campaign to the Holy Land, and only children, as pure souls people, were to take part in it. Stephen began to preach so convincingly that many children ran away from home to join him. He managed to gather more than 30,000 participants in the French city of Vendôme, from where the pilgrims moved to Marseille, located on the southern coast of France. Arriving at the place, they began to pray that the sea would part before them, since no one thought about the ships for the crossing. The sea, however, did not want to part, and it is not known how it would have ended if it were not for two Marseille merchants, Hugo Farius and Guillaume Porcus. The merchants, taking pity on the pilgrims, put at their disposal 7 ships that were to be transported across the Mediterranean. Each ship was capable of carrying about 700 people, and they probably made many flights to carry everyone. However, an unpleasant surprise awaited them. The people who were brought to Algeria were already waiting for local troops. As it turned out, Farius and Porcus agreed with local slave traders, and thus simply sold all the participants of the Children's Crusade into slavery. Nothing was known about their fate for a long time, until one of the monks, who participated in the pilgrimage and subsequently escaped, told about it 18 years later. Nothing is known about the fate of the treacherous merchants who sold the pilgrims into slavery. Most likely, they hastened to hide after the deed was done. Results of the Children's Crusade. The Children's Crusade did not achieve its goal. There were no results at all. All the pilgrims, that is, about 30,000 people, simply fell into slavery in North Africa, and their further fate is unknown. The tasks set, such as the liberation of Jerusalem and the Holy Sepulchre, were also not achieved. But subsequently, the events of the Children's Crusade formed the basis of many works of art and music. It was the only such popular movement in history. However, despite the abundance of chronicle sources dedicated to him and reliably confirmed details, very little is known about him. But one of the results of the Children's Crusade was a rise in enthusiasm among Christians, and interest in full-fledged crusades began to revive. Wives' sale in England. In the 17th century in Great Britain, one could see such a picture. Fair, merchants vying to praise their goods, shouting over each other. And across the square, a man leads a woman on a leash. They are both poorly dressed, sad, and trying not to look at each other. The husband is selling his wife. Whether the need pushed them to this or the extreme degree of disgust for each other is unknown. But this picture from those days did not surprise anyone. Marriages of that time. Until 1753, common law marriage dominated in England. A man and a woman lived together, ran a household, and raised children, but they did not have any legal obligations in relation to each other. Everything was changed by the law on marriages, adopted in 1753. It was the first legislative act regulating the position of spouses. After that, only unions concluded by the Anglican Church began to be recognized in England. Husband and wife became, from the point of view of legislation, inseparable. More precisely, the personality of the wife was completely absorbed by the husband. The English judge Sir William Blackstone wrote in the same year that the very being or legal existence of a woman is suspended during the period of marriage, or at least it is united and included in her husband, under whose wing, protection, and cover she does everything. Married ladies could not own property, and they were the property of their husbands. This was thought to be for her own good. After all, a woman is not able to make decisions and be responsible for her actions. So great a favorite is the female sex of the laws of England. Blackstone noted. Divorce. At first, breaking up a marriage was relatively simple. It was enough to file a church court for the separation of bed and table. The reason could be very cruel treatment or treason. However, it was forbidden to marry and remarry a second time. But after 1690, the procedure became much more complicated. To break off marital relations, it was necessary to apply to Parliament, and it was long and expensive. Even though special divorce courts were created in 1857 to make divorce easier, divorce was still a luxury for the poor. There were alternatives: leaving, escaping, or selling one's wife. The last method was by no means the most popular, besides illegal, but still quite effective. The laws of respect for women in considering their natural rights, 1777, noted that for the poor, the sale of a wife was seen as a way of dissolving a marriage. For many women, selling was the only way to end an unsatisfactory marriage. Deal features. It is still unknown when exactly this custom began, presumably at the end of the 17th century, but the practice became stronger by the middle of the 18th century, and the last cases were recorded at the beginning of the 20th century. Some reports indicate that the sale was known in advance. For example, an enterprising husband advertised in a local newspaper. As a rule, there was no fixed cost for the wife. Everything was decided in the order of the auction. The husband led his wife to the market with a rope tied around her neck. It happened that the buyer was known in advance. In September 1815, at Staines Market, only 3 shillings and 4 pence were offered per lot. No one dared to fight the applicant for a blonde object whose merits could only be appreciated by those who knew them. This buyer could boast of a long and intimate acquaintance. Despite all the wildness of these bargains, the wife could influence the deal. If she did not like the future master and sovereign, she could veto the contract. An 1824 report from Manchester testifies that after several auctions, the wife was brought down to 5 shillings, but she did not like the buyer and was put up again for 3 shillings and a quart of ale. In March 1766, a Southwark carpenter sold his wife in a fit of marital indifference in an alehouse. Having sobered up, the man asked her to return and, after she refused, hanged himself. In some cases, The women already knew to whom they would be sold and even gave their lovers the money to buy them. But in Scotland, the cynical custom did not take root. Scots turned out to be from a different test. There was only one case recorded.
On July 16, 1828, the husband put his wife Mary McIntosh on the grass market in Edinburgh, which caused a real mass brawl.
This case is described in the book Scotland. Autobiography edited by Rosemary Goring. The women of the district, numbering about 700, gathered and armed with stones, some even throwing them, while others wrapped the stones in stockings and handkerchiefs, rushed to attack the crowd, striking at all who tucked underhand. Finally reaching the auctioneer, they tore and scratched his face most terribly as a result of the insult inflicted on the fair sex. In the 18th century, this custom, along with the British, sailed to the United States. The wind of change. But not everyone was happy with this state of affairs. Here is what the Times newspaper writes for 1797. On Friday, a butcher put his wife up for sale in Smithfield Market, near the Ram Inn, with a leash around her neck and a rope around her waist, by which she was tied to a fence, and one cabman became the happy buyer who gave her husband 3 guineas and a crown for his former wife. It is a pity that there is no government for such depraved behavior of the lower classes. Disillusioned with the laws and realizing the futility of their attempts to call their husbands to order, some brave women stood up for the rights of their girlfriends. In 1756, in Dublin, a group of women rescued a wife, after which the husband was put on trial and placed in a corral with cattle until early the next morning. In about 1777, the sale of a wife in Carmarthenshire caused a great silence in the crowd and a sense of unease in the assembly. This practice, although condemned, rarely led to criminal prosecution. An 1853 legal handbook ordered English judges to do away with the myth of wife selling. It is a widespread mistake that a husband can get rid of his wife by selling her on the open market with a noose around her neck. Such actions on his part should be severely punished by the local judge. Finally, by the middle of the 19th century, the voices of the dissatisfied became louder. The last case of a wife being sold was in 1913 when a woman testified in a Leeds police court that her husband had sold her to one of his comrades for £1.
That's all for today. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications if you haven't already. Mr. Gaming T was with you. Bye.